Picture a wooden shelf above a coal stove in Appalachian, Ohio, 1938. 12 cans, all labeled in pencil. Every single one of them doing a job. No fresh produce, no refrigerator, no grocery run planned until payday. That shelf was the plan, and it fed a family of 4 through an entire winter on almost nothing. We stopped trusting that shelf somewhere along the way. We started calling canned food a compromise. It never was. Number 24 turns a can of salmon into a dinner worth sitting down for. Number 5 takes a can of lentils most people ignore and makes it into something that tastes like it cooked all day. When did a full pantry shelf stop being enough? Because this list is about to change. That number 25. Canned tomato soup, stretched 3 ways. 1 can of tomato soup, and most people stop right there, heat, and serve. Done. That was never the point. Add a spoonful of butter and a pinch of dried basil, and it becomes a bisque. Stir in a handful of cooked pasta, and it becomes a meal. Thin it with a little water and pour it over rice, and it stretches into dinner for 2 solo seniors who assume one can only feed 1 meal, have been underselling this pantry staple for years. The smell, when that butter melts into the hot tomato, is warm and slightly sweet. Nothing like the flat version eaten straight from the pot. A can that costs less than $1 has been doing the work of 3 separate dinners for generations. Most people just never thought to let it. Number 24. Canned salmon patties, depression style. Canned salmon, a beaten egg, a handful of cracker crumbs, formed into patties and fried in a hot skillet until both sides turn gold and crisp. This dinner fed families across the Midwest and the South through some of the leanest years this country ever saw, and it still costs almost nothing to make today. Nostalgic boomers who watched a mother or grandmother press those patties by hand on a weeknight will recognize the smell the instant the pan heats up, savory and slightly smoky around the edges. A fresh salmon fillet costs several times more and requires significantly more effort for a result that is genuinely comparable on the plate. The can was never the inferior option. Someone simply decided at some point that it was, and charged accordingly for the fresh version. Ever since, number 23. Canned corn and potato chowder. 2 cans, 1 pot. Canned corn, diced potato, a little onion, if you have one, simmered together in water or broth until the potato turns soft and the corn releases its sweetness into the liquid. Thicken it with a spoonful of flour stirred into a little cold water, and it becomes a chowder thick enough to hold a spoon upright. Cost-conscious, cooks feeding a household on a tight week need this one in rotation permanently. The smell filling a kitchen while this simmers is warm and starchy, like a farmhouse on a cold afternoon. A restaurant bowl of corn chowder costs several times what this entire pot runs, made from ingredients that have been sitting quietly in your pantry the whole time. Nothing about this dinner requires an apology. Number 22. Canned tuna noodle, 1 pot. Canned tuna, egg noodles, a can of cream of mushroom soup, everything into 1 pot, with a cup of water and cooked until the noodles soften into the sauce. This was a Tuesday night staple in households across this country for decades, the kind of dinner that appeared without ceremony and disappeared without leftovers. Overwhelmed modern parents juggling work and school pickups and everything else in between still need exactly this dinner on certain nights, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. The sauce turns thick and savory as the noodles absorb it, coating every piece of tuna in something rich enough to taste deliberate rather than hasty. Most modern convenience meals cost 3 or 4 times more per serving for a result that is rarely as satisfying as this pot. Number 21. Canned peaches over cornbread. Drain a can of peaches, warm them gently in a small pan with a pinch of cinnamon until the syrup thickens slightly, then spoon them over a square of warm cornbread. This was dessert in thousands of southern and midwestern households where fresh fruit was a seasonal luxury and a can of peaches was simply what you had instead. Sentimental grandchildren who remember this exact combination from a grandmother's kitchen often spend years trying to recreate the specific sweetness of those canned peaches over crumbling cornbread, not realizing the original was already the perfect version. The smell of warm cinnamon peach syrup is unmistakable once you know it. Today, a fresh peach dessert at a restaurant costs more than this entire meal, including the cornbread, ever did. Number 20. Canned tomatoes and white beans. Open a can of white beans. Open a can of diced tomatoes. Pour both into a pot with a clove of garlic and a drizzle of oil, and simmer until the tomatoes break down into the beans and everything thickens into something almost stew-like. This is the kind of dinner a practical home cook builds without a recipe, the kind that appears in 20 minutes from pantry staples most people already own. The tomatoes turn sweet and slightly acidic as they reduce, coating each bean in a sauce that tastes like it took far longer than it did. Restaurants charge considerably more for a dressed-up version of this exact combination with a different name on the menu. The pantry version costs almost nothing and feeds 2 people without a single fresh ingredient required. Number 19. Canned sardines on toast. Sardines on toast was a working man's dinner in mill towns and mining towns across this country for generations, eaten standing at a counter after a long shift. No apology offered and none needed. The fish comes ready to eat straight from the tin, pressed onto toast rubbed with a cut garlic clove, finished with a squeeze of whatever acid was on hand. Working-class viewers who grew up in households where nothing convenient got turned down will recognize this immediately. The flavor is sharp and briny and deeply savory, the kind of thing that fills a stomach completely on almost no budget at all. Today, sardines are suddenly expensive at artisan restaurants, served on wood boards with a markup that would have made a Milltown kitchen erupt in laughter. During World War II, the United States Department of Agriculture ran a nationwide campaign urging Americans to trust the can, not as a compromise, as a patriotic act. Canned food was positioned as efficient, reliable, and nutritionally sound at a time when the country needed its calories accounted for carefully. Nutritionists working with the Federal Rationing Board confirmed what home cooks already knew, that a well-stocked pantry of canned goods could sustain a family through almost anything. That knowledge did not disappear after the war ended. It just stopped being taught. When did the can become something to hide in the back of the cupboard? Subscribe now because this list is bringing it back to the front. Number 18. Canned chickpea and tomato stew. A can of chickpeas, a can of crushed tomatoes, a pinch of cumin, a pinch of smoked paprika, simmered together until the chickpeas soften slightly and absorb the spiced tomato broth around them. This combination traveled into American kitchens through diaspora communities from the Middle East and North Africa. Families who already knew that chickpeas and tomatoes together needed almost nothing added to become a complete meal. American diaspora viewers who grew up eating versions of this dish understand instinctively what the rest of the country is still figuring out. The broth turns deep and fragrant as the spices bloom into the tomato, smelling like a kitchen that has been cooking for hours, even though the pot has barely been on 20 minutes. A can of chickpeas costs almost nothing and delivers protein. Most people pay considerably more for elsewhere. Number 17. Canned corned beef hash, pan-fried. Open the can, slice it into the pan, press it flat, and leave it alone. That last part is the whole trick. Most people stir corned beef hash constantly and end up with something soft and pale and disappointing. Leave it alone for several minutes over medium heat, and the bottom turns dark and crisp and almost caramelized. The kind of crust that makes the whole kitchen smell like a diner on a Saturday morning. Nostalgic boomers who remember ordering this at a lunch counter know exactly what that crust looks and smells like, and how rarely it appears at home because nobody taught the patience the dish actually requires. A diner plate of corned beef hash costs several times more than the can itself, and is frequently no better than what a hot skillet and a few minutes of restraint produces at home. Number 16. Canned evaporated milk rice pudding. A can of evaporated milk, a cup of cooked rice, a spoonful of sugar, a pinch of nutmeg. Simmered slowly until the milk thickens around the rice, and the whole pot turns creamy and slightly sweet. This was dessert and dinner and comfort all at once in households where fresh dairy was expensive and a pantry can lasted months without spoiling. Solo seniors who remember a grandmother stirring this on a back burner on cold evenings will recognize the smell immediately. Warm and faintly caramelized, like something between custard and porridge. A small container of store-bought rice pudding costs several times more per serving and tastes noticeably flatter than the version made slowly from a can most people already have, sitting in their cupboard. The evaporated milk does something fresh milk simply cannot, thickening into a richness that no shortcut version ever quite matches. Number 15. Canned green beans with bacon grease. Drain the can, pour the beans into a skillet already warm with a spoonful of saved bacon grease, season with salt and a pinch of black pepper, and cook low until the beans turn tender and slightly glossy. This is Southern table cooking at its most economical, the kind of side dish that appeared at every church supper and family dinner across the rural South without anyone calling it a recipe. Working-class viewers who grew up in households where the bacon grease jar sat permanently on the stove will recognize this preparation instantly. The smell of green beans warming in that fat is specific and unmistakable, savory and slightly smoky in a way no butter substitute ever replicates. A can of green beans costs almost nothing. The technique costs even less. Yet, the result consistently outperforms fresher, more expensive preparations that skip the fat entirely. Number 14. Canned pumpkin soup. No cream needed. A can of pumpkin puree is not just for pie. Simmer it with a little broth, a pinch of cinnamon, a pinch of cumin, and enough water to thin it to soup consistency, and it becomes a bowl of something warm and deeply savory that requires no cream, no roasting, and no fresh pumpkin anywhere near the process. Cost-conscious seniors living alone need this one specifically, because a single can makes 2 full bowls of soup for a price that barely registers on a weekly budget. The color alone is striking, deep orange and almost luminous in a bowl, smelling of warm spice and something faintly earthy underneath. Canned pumpkin retains more consistent flavor than fresh roasted pumpkin, which varies wildly depending on the variety and the season. A fact the fresh produce aisle has never been particularly eager to advertise. Number 13. Canned clam chowder stretched with potato. A can of clam chowder, good on its own, but never quite filling enough for a full dinner, becomes something else entirely when you dice 1 potato into it and simmer the whole pot for 20 minutes until the potato softens into the broth. The starch from the potato thickens the chowder, naturally deepening the clam flavor instead of diluting it, and suddenly a single can feeds 2 people instead of 1. Family heritage viewers who remember New England clam chowder as a weekend ritual, something their family drove hours to eat fresh from a coastal town, can recreate that memory for almost nothing on a Tuesday night at home. The smell while it simmers is briny and thick and almost coastal, a specific kind of comfort that a bowl of restaurant chowder costing several times more rarely improves upon. Here is what nobody in the food industry wants you to remember. Multiple nutritional studies have confirmed that canned vegetables and legumes retain comparable vitamin content to their fresh equivalents, and in some cases more, because canning locks nutrients in at peak ripeness, while fresh produce loses them during days of transit and shelf time. The premium grocery market built an entire aesthetic around fresh and local and seasonal specifically to make the pantry can feel inferior. It was never inferior. It was inconvenient to their margins. Who decided? A can of tomatoes was something to apologize for. Drop your best canned dinner in the comments below. Then keep watching, because the best entries on this list are still ahead. Number 12. Canned kidney beans and rice Southern style. Red kidney beans simmered low with a little onion, a bay leaf, and whatever seasoning the pantry had that week, ladled over a bowl of white rice until the bean broth soaks into the grains underneath. This dish fed families across Louisiana and the wider South for generations on almost nothing, built from ingredients that cost pennies a serving, and stretched across multiple meals without anyone at the table feeling shortchanged. American diaspora viewers with roots in Southern cooking recognize this combination the way others recognize a childhood address, immediately and without effort. The beans turn soft and slightly earthy, the broth thickening naturally around them as they cook down. A restaurant version of red beans and rice costs several times more per bowl and rarely improves on the original that a pantry can and 20 minutes of patience already produces at home. Number 11. Canned tomato and egg skillet. Pour a can of diced tomatoes into a warm skillet. Season it well. Let it simmer until it reduces slightly and deepens in color. Then crack 2 eggs directly into the sauce and cover the pan until the whites set and the yolks stay soft. This is a complete dinner in one pan. Protein and vegetable and sauce all finished together without a single extra dish required. Curious younger cooks discovering that tinned food can anchor a real meal often land here first because it looks impressive and costs almost nothing. The eggs turn silky on top of the tomato, the edges of the whites just catching the heat from the sauce below, the yolks still runny enough to break into the tomato when a fork presses through. Nothing about this dinner needs defending. Number 10. Canned fruit cobbler, 1 pan. Drain a can of peaches or cherries or mixed fruit, pour the fruit into a small baking dish, mix a simple batter of flour, sugar, butter, and a splash of milk, spoon it over the top, and bake until the batter turns golden and the fruit bubbles up through the crust at the edges. This was church supper dessert across the American South and Midwest for decades, the kind of thing that appeared in a 9x13 dish on a folding table and disappeared before anyone got a second helping. Sentimental grandchildren who remember this exact cobbler cooling on a counter understand that A can of fruit and 20 minutes in an oven produces something no fresh fruit version reliably improves upon. The smell while it bakes is warm and syrupy and unmistakable, the kind that pulls people into a kitchen from 2 rooms away. Number 9. Canned spinach and garlic on pasta. Drain a can of spinach, squeeze it as dry as you can get it, then warm it in a pan with olive oil, a clove of garlic, and a pinch of red pepper flakes until the garlic turns golden and the spinach absorbs the oil completely. Toss it through cooked pasta and finish with a little of the pasta water to loosen everything into a sauce. Practical home cooks who want a weeknight dinner that takes less than 15 minutes without reaching for a delivery app need exactly this. The garlic turns sharp and fragrant in the hot oil, mellowing slightly as the spinach comes in, giving the whole dish a depth that tastes considerably more involved than opening a can actually is. Fresh spinach wilts down to the same volume as the canned version anyway, at 3 or 4 times the price per serving. Number 8. Canned beef stew stretched with root vegetables. A can of beef stew, already seasoned and thick, becomes a genuine dinner for 2 when you dice 1 carrot and 1 potato into it and let everything simmer together for 20 minutes until the vegetables soften into the existing broth. The can provides the flavor base. The fresh vegetables provide the bulk. Together, they cost less than half of what a bowl of beef stew from a restaurant runs, and the result, after that 20 minutes on the stove, is indistinguishable from something that has been cooking all afternoon. Family heritage viewers who remember a pot of beef stew as a Sunday staple know that the smell alone, savory and meaty and warm, is enough to make a kitchen feel like somewhere worth being on a cold evening. The can was never a shortcut. It was always the starting point. Number 7. Canned pinto beans. Southwest style. A can of pinto beans, warmed in a pan with a little lard or oil, a pinch of cumin, and a clove of garlic, mashed straight into the pot, mashed roughly until half the beans break down, and thicken the rest into something rich and spreadable. This is refried beans without the process. Ready in 10 minutes from a single can. The kind of thing that appears at tables across the Southwest and has for generations without anyone calling it a recipe or writing it down anywhere. American diaspora viewers with roots in Texas, New Mexico, or Arizona recognize this preparation, the way they recognize a family member's handwriting, immediately and without having to think about it. Spread onto a warm tortilla or eaten alongside rice, it becomes a complete meal for almost nothing. Built on knowledge that traveled north through families long before any cookbook caught up. Number 6. Canned tomato sauce over polenta. Pour a can of plain tomato sauce into a pan with a clove of garlic and a pinch of dried oregano. Simmer it until it darkens slightly and the raw tomato smell gives way to something richer and sweeter. Then ladle it over a bowl of warm polenta made from nothing more than cornmeal and water. This was peasant food across the American South and Italian immigrant communities for generations. 2 pantry staples combining into something that tastes considerably more expensive than its actual cost. Solo seniors eating alone tonight need exactly this. 1 pot, 1 bowl, 1 simple dinner that still manages to feel like something worth sitting down for. The sauce deepens in color and smell as it reduces, turning from bright acidic red to something darker and almost smoky at the edges. Nothing about this dinner costs more than $1 to make. Research published through university extension programs in the 1980s confirmed something Depression-era home economists already understood. A pantry stocked with canned protein, canned vegetables, and canned legumes could sustain a household through financial hardship without a single nutritional deficit, provided the cook knew what to do with each can. That knowledge was taught in home economics classrooms across this country for decades. Then the curriculum changed, the classes disappeared, and an entire generation grew up without it. The final entries on this list are what that education looked like in practice. Number 5. Canned lentil soup, doctored right. A can of lentil soup, straight from the tin, tastes exactly like what it is, serviceable and a little flat. Add a spoonful of vinegar, a pinch of cumin, and a drizzle of olive oil stirred in just before serving, and it becomes something else entirely. The vinegar lifts the whole bowl, cutting through the earthiness of the lentils and brightening every spoonful in a way that makes the soup taste made from scratch rather than open from a can. Cost-conscious seniors who rely on pantry staples but want their dinners to taste considered rather than convenient need this trick specifically. The difference between a flat bowl and a bright one costs almost nothing and takes under 30 seconds. Yet most people eat the flat version their entire lives without realizing the fix was sitting in the cabinet the whole time. Number 4. Canned salmon and potato bake. A can of salmon, drained and flaked, layered with thinly sliced potato, and a simple white sauce made from butter. flour, and a cup of milk, baked in a small dish until the top turns golden and the potato softens into the salmon underneath. This dinner appeared on tables across New England and the Pacific Northwest for generations. Built on canned salmon that cost a fraction of fresh, and a technique simple enough to teach a child. Nostalgic boomers who remember this dish from a grandmother's kitchen often describe it as the dinner that made them realize canned food was never the lesser version of anything. The smell while it bakes is rich and buttery and slightly oceanic, filling a kitchen with something that feels considerably more generous than its ingredients actually cost to buy. Number 3. Canned corn fritters. Nothing wasted. Drain a can of corn. Mix the kernels into a simple batter of flour, egg, and a pinch of salt. Drop spoonfuls into a hot skillet with a little oil and press each one flat. They cook in minutes, the edges turning crisp and golden while the center stays soft and slightly sweet from the corn itself. Zero-waste viewers who treat a pantry can as an opportunity rather than a fallback will recognize this immediately as the kind of recipe that stretches a single ingredient into a complete meal without adding much cost at all. The sound of the batter hitting a hot pan is immediate and satisfying, a sharp sizzle that settles into a steady crackle as the edges set. A stack of these fritters costs almost nothing and produces something no one at the table ever turns down. Number 2. The single can supper. One can, one pot, one person. No apology required. Heat whatever is in the pantry, season it properly, and eat it slowly at a table set for one. Solo seniors living alone today often feel that a real dinner needs more components than this. More effort, more proof that the meal was worth making. It never did. A grandmother eating alone in 1942 never treated a single can as a lesser dinner. She treated it as enough because it was enough, and because cooking for one never meant cooking with any less care or any less seasoning in the pot. The steam rising off one bowl at one table still counts as a real dinner tonight, exactly the way it always did. A full pantry shelf and the knowledge to use it was never a backup plan. It was always the whole plan, start to finish. Number 1. The pantry shelf, the original emergency fund. A row of labeled cans on a wooden shelf above a coal stove, every one of them doing a job, none of them sitting there just in case. That pantry was not a backup plan. It was the plan, built quietly by people who understood that a full shelf meant a fed family, regardless of what happened next, regardless of what the week brought, regardless of whether payday arrived on time. Every entry on this list came from that shelf. Every dinner, every trick, every stretched meal that fed 2 people on the price of 1 came from knowing exactly what each can was capable of and never apologizing for using it. That knowledge is not old-fashioned. It is not a compromise. It is one of the most practical things a kitchen can hold. Restock that shelf. Label every can. Know what you have. You will never look at a full pantry the same way again. Pick 3 from this list and try them this week. Start with number 23, number 11, and number 1, because together they cover the easiest win, the most surprising result, and the mindset shift that makes everything else on this list finally make sense. I made the canned salmon and potato bake myself before writing this, half expecting something I would have to talk myself into eating, and finish the entire dish before it had a chance to cool. Tell me below which canned ingredient your own grandparents kept on the shelf without fail. The one that was always there, no matter what. I want the specific can, not just a general answer. The pantry shelf was never a sign of going without. It was a sign of knowing exactly what you were doing, passed down quietly, one labeled can at a time. Which can has always lived in your pantry, no matter what? Subscribe now, and the next list will be waiting there when you need it.